Tottenham up next for Arne Slot's Reds. A very important game in the Stewart household. Hello Dad if you're watching. And it's going to be a very important game for Liverpool as they look to retake the advantage at the top of the Premier League table. Arne Slot's just finished his pre-match press conference and he had plenty to say about a whole variety of topics. We spoke about the ambition of his players. We spoke about the importance of getting players back fit at this particular time of the season. Had some very interesting things to say about Spurs as well and their reputation maybe beyond England. I asked him a question about Luis Diaz and playing as a number 9, and he had plenty of things to say about that, including correcting me a couple of times, which I don't mind about that. But as is always the case, we'll hear more and more about that once we're back in the lab. So here we are once again in the lab, full of joy and Christmas cheer and a few extra mince pies courtesy of the LFC press room, ready to dissect everything Arne Slot had to say in his pre-match press conference ahead of the game against Spurs. Now let's start at the top. There was no official contract questions. I think that was helped by the fact that Video Corner had just done a little piece with Arne Slot in a different room for Sky Sports. Expect to see that in and around the coverage of the Spurs game. Side note, Gabriel Clark was also in the building to talk to Virgil van Dijk, so perhaps you can expect to see that in Amazon Prime's coverage of the Liverpool-Leicester game. But that's another thing for another day. Now, there were no major contract questions. Carl Markham tried to sneak one in when he was talking about Trent, but we'll come to that in a moment. Injury-wise, there was some really good news here. There's still only 2 players in the red, as Arne Slot called it. Obviously, Conor Bradley and Ibrahima Konate still not training with the team. He didn't want to put a time frame on it. He learned from the situation with Diogo Jota that sometimes the last part of an injury rehab can take longer than expected. So he didn't really want to put pressure on them by giving specific times or dates. But all inferences seem to be good that their rehabs are progressing as would be expected. So hopefully it won't be too long until we see them. Okay, so it's time for my top takeaways. Top takeaway number 1. The history of Tottenham is not quite the same everywhere. Now, Slot was asked about Spurs and about how he felt about this game and obviously the upcoming draw in the League Cup semi-finals, as we're going to be playing Spurs, I think 4 times between now and the end of February. So lots of chances to play against them. And Slot was very effusive in his praise of not only Spurs present, but Spurs past. It's interesting to note that considering the reputation of Spursy that they have here in England, that their reputation across Europe is a little bit different. They're known for playing adventurous, attacking football. Slot name-checked the likes of Paul Gascoigne, David Ginola, Glenn Hoddle, Rafael van der Vaart, Gareth Bale, Luka Modric. And when you think of those names, they really have always tended to be a team who plays attacking football, and that has endured. And it doesn't really surprise in a country like Holland that really does prioritise that style of play, that they would be so popular over there. I think it's interesting to note as well at this point that Spurs did try to sign Arne Slot themselves before they went for Ange Postecoglou. Arne decided that he wanted to play Champions League football with Feyenoord, but it's clear that there was some mutual appreciation, let's say, on both sides. So it wasn't as if he just rejected them out of hand. He also went on to say that he hopes that Ange can win trophies, not just Ange as a manager, but as a style of football, because he is very much an advocate of attacking football as well. And he says that it will be fantastic to see that style of play be able to be married with winning, and it'll be more interesting for everybody, which I personally think is very true as well. Some people might have rolled their eyes or raised an eyebrow when he said that, but I 100% believe him when he says that. I think that he is truly an advocate for attacking football. I mean, I think that's a part of the reason why he ended up at Liverpool, because our Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards knew that about him as well. He called them a joy to watch, which 100% is true, I can imagine. Whether they're a joy to play against is sometimes a different matter. He was asked about their inconsistency and whether that makes it harder to game plan against. He kind of offered a different view, and I kind of tend to agree with him, because essentially a lot of people are focusing on the fact you don't know what kind of Spurs you're going to get on the day, but you do know what they're going to try to do. Ange is very consistent with what he wants his players to do. Whether or not they can do it from one game to the next is another matter. But when you're a manager and you're planning to game plan against a team, you can't control that part. You can only assume they're going to be at their best and game plan accordingly. So Arne Slot is going to be preparing his team for the very best of Tottenham. And to be honest, if the best of Tottenham doesn't turn up, then that makes his plan even easier to execute. So even though it might be tricky to guess what you're going to get if you're a pundit trying to predict the score of the game, if you're a manager trying to plan for Tottenham, perhaps it may be a little bit easier than we thought. Top takeaway number 2, Trent's ambition is not a bad thing. Now, Slot was asked about Trent's recent comments about wanting to build a legacy. He said that he wanted, when he finished his playing days, to be known as the best right back in the world, and that has caused some kind of backlash within the fan base. There's been a few comments like this that Trent's made, particularly the stuff where he's talking about wanting to win the Ballon d'Or, which has gone down badly. But Slot likes it. Slot has no problem with this line of thinking, and he made a very important and good point that every player who is elite has this thought process. You aren't able to reach the top of the football if you aren't that ambitious and that driven. And so there are plenty of players, in fact most of the players in the Liverpool squad would want the same thing, it's just they're not necessarily out there talking about it. Now, I think the part of the reason why this causes so much consternation is there's an implication there that these are individual things he's putting ahead of team achievements. I think the interview he did with Harriet Pryor, he was given the option of team awards and Ballon d'Or, and he put Ballon d'Or, so I think he's putting himself ahead of the team. Well, Slot doesn't seem to think so. I think Slot made the distinction that he understands that he needs the team to be special as an individual. And I think that Slot has full trust in Trent, that he does believe that and he does understand that. And again, I think you talk about the improvements that he has made in the defensive side of his game. That is essentially a sacrifice where he is maybe putting beside some of his more gaudy attacking numbers in terms of assists and key passes, etc., to be in position to defend. Now, this is all said within the prism of the fact that he didn't have his greatest defensive game against Fulham. Listen, that was a game, that can happen. I think over the course of this season, you have to acknowledge that the trend is going upwards in terms of his appetite for defending. And so I don't think we as a fan base should be scared of these kind of comments. The interesting part was that, as I said before, this was almost a bit of a contract question from Carl Markham, because he added at the end of it, aside from do you like these comments about Trent wanting to build a legacy, do you think that you've laid a platform here for him to do it? i.e., do you think he'll have to leave if he wants to become one of the best players in the world? And Slot kind of chose to ignore that part for whatever reason. But that's the interesting part here, isn't it? Because another reason why the fan base is so upset with him around these kind of comments is because it feels like a very Real Madrid thing to say. When you talk about Ballon d'Ors, you talk about legacy, you talk about all those things. But that's just the impression. I genuinely believe that there are the players within the Liverpool dressing room who talk about this kind of stuff all the time, and it's never really given the same consideration. I think Mohamed Salah is a perfect example. People, when Mohamed Salah comes out and says he wants to be one of the best players in the world, he wants to be one of the best players in the Premier League, he wants to break as many Liverpool records as he can, he wants to almost pretend that Ian Rush doesn't exist because he's never going to get to his records. No one really accuses him of the same thing. So I think context is really important here when we're talking about Trent. We don't need to be so scared of Real Madrid every time he says something. I think there is a team where he's at right now where he can fulfill all of his ambitions, both individually and as a team. Top takeaway number 3. The table still doesn't matter, although it might very soon. Slot was asked about how he's feeling now, considering the change over the last few weeks from having a 9-point gap to second place to potentially being in second place by the time Liverpool kick off against Spurs if Chelsea win at Goodison Park. This comes off the back of lots of the oh, it's Liverpool's title to lose kind of talk that we saw after Man City. And obviously, if Chelsea do what most people are expecting them to do and take the lead at the top of the Premier League, then there's going to be lots and lots of talk from the bad faith people, the banter bros, all talking about Liverpool bottling a 9-point lead, bottling the league, etc., 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 making hay, making fun, making Liverpool fans' life a misery on social media. Well, as I've said before and I'll say again, luckily for all of us, that has absolutely no influence on the outcome of football matches. And Arne Slot knows this better than everyone. He is not concerned about looking at the table, and this is something we already know because he's been asked these questions before when Liverpool were doing well. When the questions were all about, when you arrived, did you expect it to be this good? Can you believe how well it's going, etc., etc., etc.? His answer was the same. I'm not looking at the table. I'm just looking at the performance of my team, looking at the next game, one at a time, one at a time. One thing he had said previously, which he repeated today, was that there's no point looking at the table at least until everyone's played everybody. So any kind of good luck or any kind of bad luck is generally evened out over the course of that time. He referenced the red cards that Arsenal had earlier on in the season, obviously the red card Liverpool had in the last game. These kind of things over the course of maybe 19 games can even themselves out. We are still 3 game weeks away from getting to that point, and even then we probably won't have played Everton, so we haven't played everybody. So there's still a long way to go before we can even really take any kind of indication from the league table. And even then, we know the league titles aren't decided or won in December or in January. It happens in April and May. And you have to remember that Arne Slot knows what it takes to win a league title. There are plenty of players in that dressing room who know what it takes to win a league title. And not just the ones who've won for Liverpool. Dominik Szoboszlai has won leagues. Luis Diaz has won leagues. Darwin Nunez has won leagues. They know the rhythms of a season, the ebbs and the flows, and they know that they're not going to get carried away with being in fantastic form or in bad form or winning it all or losing it all or whatever else that those of us in the outside world might say. And you know what? That should be comfort to every single Liverpool fan out there. Forget what they're saying on the internet. Forget what your mates are saying in the group chat. Just watch this team and we'll see them go. We'll see them go far. So, it's time for my question, which was about Luis Diaz and his play as a number 9, and will he continue to play there now that the traditional number 9s are back fit and firing?
Hi Arne, you've had goals from your number 9 position in back-to-back games now, with Jota against Fulham and then Darwin against Southampton. We saw Luis Diaz play as the number 9 in Jota's absence. He played really well, but after that hat-trick against Leverkusen, he found goals and even shots a little bit harder to come by. Have you seen enough from him in that position to say that you're going to get more opportunities to develop as a number 9, even now the main 2 are back fit and firing?
Yeah, let's start with the positive thing. I think it was a week ago where people said, yeah, Darwin doesn't get his numbers, and 1 week later he has an assist and a goal. Then you said, and mostly you're correct, but then you said, yeah, Jota as a 9 scored a goal. I think he came in as a midfielder, because Darwin was the 9 at that moment, but he is also a 9 for us. So Lucio can play for sure in that position. He's done that very well for us. I think he's played there a few times, not that many. I think Girona, he played on the left. So I think after the Leverkusen game, he maybe played more games as a winger than as a 9. But he can play there, and we've got more options to play as a 9, like you just said, Darwin and Diogo as well. But Lucio is definitely part of that position as well.
So the most interesting part of this answer from Arne was the part that I got wrong. Now, he corrected me about something I said regarding Jota playing and scoring as a number 9 against Fulham. He said that Jota came on as a midfielder in that game, even though when you consider where he was when he scored, it was very much in the number 9 position, turning Cuenca on the edge of the box to slot home. But the idea that Jota came onto the pitch as a midfielder is a really fascinating one for me. We've seen him do it before. He played there against West Ham. It was in the League Cup. But the idea of him and Nunez both starting games hasn't really been floated that much, even though they combined very well for that game going against Fulham. And they did actually okay in the game against West Ham as well. So it's something that we maybe might see a little bit more of, and there's a few reasons for this. One, I do think that Diaz has now become a true number 9 option, so it's not a case of feeling like you're throwing all your eggs into one basket by having Jota and Nunez on the pitch as well. But the other thing is that we know that Slot looks at his production in terms of positions rather than in terms of players. So goals from a number 9, goals from a number 10, goals from the wide forwards, goals from midfield. And perhaps he's looking at Dom Szoboszlai, who's now played a lot of time as a number 10, still only scored 2 goals. Maybe playing Jota as the 10 is the way to get more goals into the team. We've still got lots of games coming up over the course of the rest of the season where we're playing teams who are currently in the bottom half of the table at home. And maybe these are the kind of games where you can afford to start 4 forwards rather than just the 3. So we're going to start to see a little bit more of Jota playing alongside another centre forward. Plus, in the world where we've got 5 substitutes and hopefully maintaining a fit squad, you've got the likes of Chiesa, the likes of Harvey Elliott to come in if you need to change things at any point. And then there'll obviously still be Szoboszlai, who may well be playing a little bit deeper, maybe rotating with Gravenberch and McAllister and Jones. So suddenly you've got 4 players who can all play in those 2 more midfield positions, and the squad looks a little bit deeper, a little bit stronger. We'll have to wait and see exactly how that pans out. But as I say, the idea of Jota as a midfielder potentially going forward is one that is very interesting, because we've seen Cody Gakpo under Jurgen Klopp play that midfielder, and it didn't really quite work. He's really benefited from just being a left winger and really showing his best form there. For Diogo Jota, it's a different story. Someone who traditionally has struggled at times to get in the game. One of the things people said about Jota was that you wouldn't hear from him in a game and then he'd pop up and score. If he's playing as a number 10 and he's more involved in the link-up play, maybe that will be different. But I do think the idea of having 4 forwards in the team is a tantalising one, and one I think we should all look forward to. So there you have it, another press conference review for another day. We've got a couple more of these before we get to 2025, but I'm hoping that you all enjoy the Tottenham game on Sunday. I'm really hoping that I enjoy the Tottenham game on Sunday, because for some of you who wouldn't be aware, my dad is a Spurs fan. I kind of trailed that in the earlier section. So I don't want to have to turn my phone off full time. I really don't. I'm going to be on Press Box on Monday talking about this game as well, so watch out for that on LFC TV. And I do not want to be talking about anything other than a handsome Liverpool win. So there you have it. Thank you very much as always for watching. I want to give another shout out to my Substack page. Go and have a read of it there. There won't be a match report this Sunday because I won't be attending the game at the Tottenham Stadium, but there will be a new article out early on next week where I'm talking about something from the game where you can all get your teeth into. And until then, see you soon.